Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today. I am excited to be talking to you today about the General Data Protection Regulation. You may also have heard it called GDPR. So that's what we're going to be discussing, or at least introducing today. And I'm sure you'll be hearing a lot more about it as the year progresses. A little bit about myself. My name is Taylor Craig. I'm the Senior Platforms Consultant here at Kineo. Been with the company for about 3 years now, a little over 3 years now, and I kind of wear several different hats. I get the privilege of working with potential clients. I get to work with existing clients and basically train you on your Totara platform, get you comfortable with the core solution that's there, and then also get you up to speed on any customizations that we may develop for you. Make sure that you're trained on it, have the documentation that you need, all of that good stuff. So that is my role as a platforms consultant. So today we're going to be talking about GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. So I'm not going to read all of this to you, but essentially what it is it's a regulation of the management of people's personal data in Europe. So you may be watching this and think, well, I'm in the United States. Why does this even impact me? If you have people who are accessing your Totara site who are in Europe, if they're teaching on that site, if they are accessing it for learning, if they're doing anything like that, GDPR does actually impact you as of May of this year. So it is something that is going into effect this month, actually. So that's one of the reasons we wanted to make sure and talk about it right here at the beginning of the year, or beginning of the month, excuse me. So one thing that it does, it controls how people's personal information is handled, how it is gathered. Also, there's a lot more ability for individuals to actually consent to the use of their personal data. They have to consent to that. And then also, their data has to be as easily withdrawn from your system as it was for you to place it into the system. So basically, it's to protect you and to protect your users, keeping your information safe, and basically giving your individuals who are on your site the right to manage their personal data. Now, I in no way am a expert on GDPR, and this is something that I'm learning as we go as well. But just kind of want to give you a good overall, this is what's here and what's coming for you, especially for those of you who have individuals who are in Europe. So as I mentioned earlier, yes, it does affect you if you have people who are accessing your Totara site who are in Europe. May that be that they're teaching, learning, any of those things. So it is going to affect you. Now, Totara is ready for GDPR, but you need to be on version 11. So Totara 11 is GDPR compliant, and we will take a look at all of the different information that is in there. There is some pretty good extensive documentation out there at help.totaralearning.com. This is the direct link. I will post it in the comments of the video as well, so that you can access that if you need it. And then also Wesley Holden at Totara did an excellent job of explaining GDPR as well. And I will post a video link to his video as well, so that you can access that and as a good reference as well. So let's take a look at where all of the settings are located for GDPR. So this is a Totara 11 instance, and there's a few things that you need to be aware of for GDPR and a few things that need to be turned on. So first and foremost, one of the main things that needs to be turned on is underneath advanced features. So site administration, advanced features. This is going to allow you to have multiple site policies. So if we go down, it's going to be the last setting on this screen. There we go. Enable site policies. One thing to be aware of, if you're using the legacy site policy that is in there from Moodle, if you're using that now, you check this and save your changes, that site policy will be lost, as this one does replace it. So you will need to put the data that you have, put that into the new site policies area. Okay. So once you check that box and save changes, Then you're going to have a new area underneath security. So you'll have security and then site policies. Okay, so here you can manage policies. So if we go in and take a look, I've actually created 2 different policies on the site. We'll go ahead and we'll create a new one. So we're going to create a new policy. You can have the same policy in multiple languages, meaning that whatever my language is set in my profile, then I would see that policy in my preferred language. So if you have a multilingual site, then this would be something to consider and something to do. So be aware of that. So terms of use, right? So that might be an option for your statement, your policy there. I'm just going to grab some cheater text like I always do. I'm going to throw that in. This is a text-only field, so you can put in whatever you need to here. So here is going to be the consent statement. So this is going to be where you put the information of, by checking this box or by saying yes, then you agree that we can use your personal data for X, Y, and Z. Or by checking this consent box, you are consenting that we are holding your first name, last name, email address, blah, 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 whatever personal data that you are keeping on that person. You do have to let them know with the GDPR new policy there. Okay, so here's going to be the consent label. So this is going to be giving your consent. So this is where your yes would go. Withholding your consent, this is where you would be saying, nope, don't agree to that. So that would be there. Whoops, I didn't mean for that to be a shouting now. And then what you can also say is consent required to use this site. So if this box is checked, what's going to happen if I'm a new user, it's going to prompt me with this policy. So if you add statement, what this button is going to do is it's basically going to give you multiple statements that they have to agree to on one site policy. So you may have to have them agree that you can use their email address and that you can email them. So those types of things as well. So if you have multiples, this is where you would do that. I'm going to remove that. I'm going to ask if I'm sure, and then save. Okay, so what this is showing me, I've got 2 different policies you'll see that are already published, and I have one that is in draft mode. Okay, so if I say one new version is in draft mode, it's going to bring me back in here. If I make any changes, adjustments, anything like that, it should actually save it as another version, I believe. So if we save, okay, I guess because I hadn't published it. Once you publish it, it will actually keep track of the different versions. So if you make changes to these policies, at that point, it's going to do that. So I'm going to go back to site policies over here in my admin. So I'm going to go back to manage policies. And then I'm going to click on terms of use. That's the new one that I just created. And now here's the different options. So you'll see here number of translations. I have 1 translation. I can view this, and I can add an additional translation for another language if I need to. So if that's something I need to do, I have the ability to do that here. Again, it will keep up with the different versions. I'm going to go ahead and publish this. It's going to give you a little bit of information as far as what it's going to do and where it's going to show up. Now let's take a look as a user. So I'm going to come over here and log in as a brand new user. One thing that I thought was really cool about this is you'll see here one of 3 policies. So I've got 3 policies on my site. They may be 3 different things, but I'm having them agree to all of those before they're ever even able to access my site. So this is happening for a brand new user. If there was this policy in multiple languages, I could potentially switch between them. So I'm going to say yes, submit, yes, submit. So 2 of 3 policies. Here's our 3rd policy. Now here's what happens if I say no. It's going to tell me that I'm not going to get access to the site. So if I say log me out, it's going to auto log me out, and I can't access until I agree to that particular policy. If I go back to the policy and say yes and then submit, then I am I'm in the site. So now I'm able to access the site. Okay. One thing that's available to that user now as well, so in their profile, the user has a couple of different things that they can do. So I can see my consents. So I can go underneath administration, I can see site policy consents. So basically I can access what I agreed to. So these are the things that I agreed to. This is the response that I gave, and this was the date that I gave my consent and the time that I gave my consent as well. So that's something that the user has access to. As an administrator, you have access to see that information about your user as well. So you actually have a report, and we'll look at that in a minute. Now, another thing that users can now do is they can actually request a data export. So this is going to pull out all of their personal data for them. So basically that's another aspect of GDPR where you have to allow your users to gather their own information to allow easy transfer between systems. If I was to want to take this to another company, I can easily access my own information. Okay, so it's going to tell me that my download's in progress and to check back when it's complete. If I've been in the site for a long time, this could potentially take a minute. And also it's going to determine what you as a system administrator, what you deemed as something that was necessary for them to be able to pull about themselves. So if you have it set where they can pull information about everything that they've ever done in the site, this could potentially be a pretty large file. This is a particular zip file. It is a TMZ or TBZ, I believe, file. And that particular file type can be opened with anything like WinZip or something like that. Okay, so keep that in mind as well. Now, if I come back to my profile, I go back to that request data export. Mine didn't take very long because this guy's literally done nothing in the site yet. You'll notice she did receive a notification that my export was complete. Depending on her preferences, she may have also received an email as well off of that. And so it's a TGZ, my bad, sorry, I told you wrong. So they can delete this file for themselves. It's going to keep the file, you'll see, until May 8th, so a couple of days from the moment I exported it. I can download this and then I can take it to another system, whatever I need to do. So this is kind of the GDPR from the user's perspective, from the learner's perspective. Let's look at it more so from an administrator's point of view. So we've created our site policy. We saw that we can have multiple site policies. Another thing to point out, guys, really quickly, is in order for learners to be able to see this, so underneath profile, in order for them to be able to see request data export, you do need to go underneath the role of authenticated user, and there is a special permission that has to be turned on. And I believe if you just start typing in request data, there is a permission that is specific that has to be turned on, which allows this visibility here. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. So back over as my administrator. Okay, so we have our site policies here. Like I said, I'm still kind of learning this myself. So underneath users, there is a new area called user data management. So in this particular area, you have the ability to control different settings. You can choose the export type. So the export that we just saw as my test learner, that was where that was managed by the system administrator as to what you were going to give them access to export about themselves. You've got purge types, exports, and then the exports that have happened. So this is going to show me everybody who's done an export. So I'll see that my user's done one. I had an admin user do it. You'll notice here that I have question marks here. So what happened is I actually purged this user. I deleted them completely from my site. And so what it did is it replaced the full name with question marks. So I'm not actually able to see who that was because that's part of it. If you need to, you can absolutely remove every single aspect about a person off of your site. That's also part of the system. So underneath, in order for your exports and your purges to work, you do have to set up what are called export types and purge types. So if you add an export type, you can choose what they're able to export about themselves. So we've talked about that. So the first one that I had was all of the information. So every single thing about them, they have the ability to export that. Limited profile is what you might want to do here. Put in an ID number and a description. Blah, 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 put in that information. So permitted use, so this is going to say who's going to be able to do this. User can export their own data. You can choose to include any files that that person has ever loaded to the site, so they can pull that information about themselves as well. And then here is the list of all the stuff that could potentially be included. So if you just want them to be able to pull their own name and those types of things, you can. But you can also pull, you'll see here, it's activities, all their quiz attempts, all their preferences that they have set around that. So it's going to give them the ability to pull all kinds of information. Okay. And then you can add that. Okay, so you'll see this one does include files, this one does not. So when they go to export that, they now have a choice between two different types. They can either pull all of their data or pull a limited profile, and then they're able to pull one or the other. Okay. Now, another aspect of the GDPR, about GDPR, is that you have the ability to you have to be able to completely and totally delete everything about a user. If they request to have that information deleted, you have to be able to delete everything. So in older versions of Totara, some of you may or may not be aware, when you went to delete somebody, it was just kind of, it was what we call a soft delete. It doesn't really delete them. So if you ever have to, a lot of times you'll see like kind of, it looks like the recycle symbol. You could click that and then it would literally bring that person back with all of their records, all of their information, everything. Well, now you have to have the ability to completely and totally delete those people. So there's several different purge types that can be set up. It's very similar to that export type where you can set some up where it'll purge everything, or it'll purge a little bit, or it'll whatever you have, right? So you can set it up where it will pull some of that stuff. So you have your active users, your suspended users, and then I have a full delete and then a partial delete. So where you can pull bits and pieces. So if we go in and look at the full delete, you'll see that I have it set where I can manually do this, or I can set it where it's going to automatically purge users. So what that means is that if I've clicked delete on them, I'm going to see them immediately drop off of my list of users screen, but in the background, it hasn't really completely deleted them yet. So then there's a task that runs, automatic purging task that runs in the background, that's then going to go in and it's just going to wipe that user completely out. Okay, so you'll see here, this is all the information that we could possibly gather about a person inside of Totara, and this is all the information that might potentially need to be removed about a person. Okay, so let's take a look at what this looks like from your perspective if you're doing it manually. So you can go and locate a user. So if I do browse list of users here, I'm going to go into Rose's profile, so I can do it that way, and then I can also access it using this icon here. So we have different actions here. You've got your edit, suspend. So that's another one of your purge options, where if you click the suspend option, it's going to go through and it's going to determine which data is suspended about that person. And then you can actually go in and look at the user data here. So here it's going to give me all kinds of information. So it tells me the user's name and if that person's ever requested a data export. We can select a purge type. So we'll look at that here in just a second on what we want to do with this user. If we want to get rid of her completely, what we need to do there. Here's where you set the automatic data purge. So if you're going to have it run automatically and you don't want to have to manually run that process, you just need to go in and set it. So you would set it to remove rows at a certain time, and then once that purge runs, it's going to automatically do that for you. So you may have to go in and do that for a couple of people if you need to. And then you also have your data audit. So here you can audit the data that is captured about that person. So you'll see here first name and surname 1, username 1, email 1. So it's showing me all of these different things that it's captured about my person already, and this person's not even been enrolled in anything. There's 145 items that have been processed. 14 of those items contain data, and our total data count somewhere in throughout the system is 24. So that's how I know that I've got data on this person. Okay, so let's go ahead and do select purge type. And then we can choose which purge type we want to do. That's not what I wanted. I wanted to do a full delete. Let's see. Let's switch this over. Full delete, update. Okay, so this is telling me all the stuff it's going to delete about her when that runs. Okay, and I need to check on that as to why I'm not seeing the full delete here. I'm only seeing active. That's not what I want. Okay, so when you do a user audit, once it completely purges their data, you should be able to go in here and see that all of the data is gone. I don't think it's run yet. Yeah, it hasn't run yet, but you'll see that it's already going down. So that's something to be aware of there. Again, guys, I'm not an expert on this. I'm still learning myself and kind of figuring out the bits and pieces to this because there's quite a lot to it. Okay. So once it runs, and I did figure out the other day, I can go to purge all. This is just a setting that's been in there. Purge all caches. I believe that will actually run that task for you. Now we can probably go back, and it should have got rid of her. So if we go back to users, user data management, deleted user accounts, and I believe that's this one here. So you'll see it replaced that. So if I go to users, accounts, browse list of users, rows should be gone. It just did a partial delete, looks like, because it removed her image. So I'm not doing something right. Let's look and see. Yeah, it only took out part of it. I'll check on that and see what I did wrong. But I had to have done something wrong because usually what it should do if you do it correctly is it should remove all of the data about that person, and that person literally becomes a question mark in your system, and you're not real sure who that person once was. Now, one thing too, if you want to automatically set a data purge, and it's kind of a pain in the rear to do it one by one by one. So if you have several people who need to be have that switch flipped for them, you can go under users, accounts, bulk user actions. And so you can add those people to the selection. And then you can say set deleted purge type. So then you can say, I want this to be a full delete and apply changes. And then that's going to, on the next cron run, it should delete her there. Okay, so again, I'm still learning this. I'm learning this as we go, but it is something that is going to impact several of you. The first step that you're going to need to do if you're going to be GDPR compliant is you'll need to request an upgrade. The upgrade is going to be for version 11, and so that would be your first step in making sure that you take care of this. So any questions, guys? I'm going to turn the floor over to you. I will do my best to answer any questions on GDPR and then also anything else that you may have questions on. I'm also going to run cron while I wait for questions and see if that gets rid of my user. Because I was able to get rid of some people yesterday. That's generally how it goes. It never works when I'm actually demoing it. Still not getting it to work. I am watching the questions box, guys. So if you have any questions, let me know. And then if you need a mic, I'd be glad to give you that as well. Great question, Mahogany. So GDPR is, let me go back because I can't ever remember what it stands for. General Data Protection Regulation. So it's only going to impact you if you have users who are in Europe. So those users may be instructors on your site. They may be learners on your site. They could be a variety of different people, but if they are in Europe, it is a new law that has actually been passed as of May. I think it's May. Don't give me the line. I think it's May 25th is when it goes into effect. Okay, Kim knows because they got to be ready. So May 25th is when this does go into effect, and it's just basically how you are supposed to manage and handle people's personal information. So you can only capture as much data as you absolutely need to hold for that person. And then if that person wants their data completely removed, you have to be able to take it completely off of your system. And it's got to be as easily removed as it is for them to consent. Basically gives them a lot more power as far as consenting to how their information is used. One of the things that stood out in my mind when I took some GDPR training as well, guys, is that you know how sometimes when you go to a website, it automatically has a box checked for you to be subscribed to something, and a lot of times you're just kind of blindly clicking through so you can get to where you need to get. It makes that basically is now illegal in Europe to have pre-populated checkboxes. So they have to actually see it and click that box, and that's then considered consent. So there's some really cool stuff, in my opinion, that it does, and I would like to see it happen here, but I don't know if it ever will. So that's kind of what it is in a nutshell. One thing that I wanted to make you guys aware of, I'm having our CEO check City and Guilds, which is Kineo's parent company. They did a really nice like 30-minute course, certification course on GDPR, and it's generic enough that I really feel like it would be ideal for some of our clients to take and just kind of run through. So he's checking on that to see what we need to do, and if you're interested in that, let your account manager know. They've been made aware that that's something that we're looking at to see if we can make that available to you. It's seriously like 30 minutes, but it explains it really, really well. Any other questions? Mahogany, I don't know if that affects you guys just yet. But I know it does affect Kim and Inner Systems and some of our other groups as well. Okay. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Again, I want to make sure that you're aware of this as well. Wes Holden at Totara did a What's New to Totara Learn in version 11. He did a really good job of summarizing GDPR, probably much better than me. And so definitely take a look at this. And if you get a chance, go through it. He also talks about some other cool features of version 11 as well. So that's something to be aware of. And then I will post a link to this as well as the documentation with the recording. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful rest of your week. And we will see you guys back here in a little bit. Bye, guys.